Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to What I Painted This Month, January 2016. So the first month of the year is out the way, and as you can see, not a huge number of models, but keeping things ticking over nicely, making sure to get things done every single month. And I'm finding that doing these videos is helping to motivate me quite a lot, because I finished all those Stormcast models first, and thought, you know what, there's only a couple of days left in the month, I should probably try and cram in some extra models just so the video looks a bit more populated. So then I got through those bolt action guys at the front there. So, let's discuss what we've got there exactly. So, I have a Knight Venator and a Knight Azeros for the Stormcast, one of which is converted. We have 4 Stormcast Prosecutors, and then at the bottom there we've got 2 light mortar teams and an anti-tank rifle for the Belgians. The anti-tank rifle is painted in the Chasseurs colours, and the light mortar teams are actually Finnish with Belgian heads on them. So let's start with the bolt action stuff, shall we, before we get to the really juicy paintwork. So here you can see them on the nice green natural habitat that goes with their bases quite nicely. The reason for having 2 more light mortars, I already had 1, and you can take a squad of up to 3 in the Belgian army, which is very, very nice because light mortars can move around and still fire. It doesn't even make them less accurate because they're firing indirectly. So having 3 of them just skirting around behind the human shield of my other units and just hoping to get 6 and landing some minor artillery on the enemy seems like a pretty good plan. I think that's going to be nice. Just having 1 of them I found wasn't really enough. Looking for a 6 with just 1 mortar, not very likely, but 3 of them, pretty decent chance, and the enemy aren't going to take that lightly. The anti-tank rifle, I already have 1 of these, but it's painted in just the regular colours. I wanted a Chasseur anti-tank rifle as well, just because I didn't want it to look exactly the same as the other one, and I wanted to have 2, because they're very, very cheap, they're very useful, dealing with light vehicles, potentially pinning slightly larger vehicles, and then if there aren't any vehicles around, they're pretty much just a sniper without the sniper bonuses. You can see from the back there that this actually has a little bit of work gone into the base. I used some matchsticks to build a little fence at the front there, which is very similar to what I did with my heavy artillery piece, if you remember that. Obviously that was a little bit of a bigger fence. I used milliput to build a little hill around the front of it as well, with just enough of a gap so he can stick his rifle through and actually see. That was of course then painted brown. And all these Belgians are very, very easy to paint the way I'm doing them. It's pretty much just base coats and then Agrax Earthshade over the top, apart from the flesh, which is a flesh shade. Very, very easy, but I think they look good when they're on the table. And I don't like spending a huge amount of time painting the same miniatures, especially considering you do need quite a few models for bolt action. So I didn't want anything that was going to be too time consuming. Speaking of possibly time consuming, let's go over to the Stormcast. Now, I'm very proud of the way these have turned out, just like my other Stormcast. As usual, it's the gold spray, the wash, the gold highlight, and then the gold edges in the lighter gold, which is the out of production shining gold. This guy is the Knight Azeros. Now he's supposed to have a lantern that glows, but my Stormcast are a little bit darker and moodier than most, so I didn't want to have it too bright. So for the moment I've just left it gold and silver in there. I haven't attempted any glow effects on it. I may do something with it in the future. What I was pondering was possibly having it kind of a reverse lantern, like it was sucking the light into it, a kind of a black hole, but I'm not sure if that would actually look good. I may go back to it in the future when I haven't got anything on the painting table, but for now, that's how it's going to stay. These guys weren't as difficult to paint as I'd been led to believe. I've heard people say that they're quite tricky with the wings, but I didn't really have any problem with them. The only issue I had, slightly, was the paint pots that I perched them on while painting occasionally fell over because of the large wingspan. It's very easy to overbalance them. And speaking of the wings, you can see on the back here what I've done with those. I didn't want to spend a lot of time edge highlighting each individual piece of the wing, because that would have taken a really long time, so I decided to go for the dry brushing approach, which I think has been quite effective. I started off with quite a dark grey towards the top of the wing, and then moved on to a slightly lighter grey, and moved that further down, and then by the time you get to the very tip of the wing, it's just a tiny little bit of white. So I think that looks very effective. Most people have done these guys with white wings, but that was going to be far too bright for that more dingy look that I'm going for. So I think this looks pretty damn good. Of course, this guy is the converted one, and there is a separate video on that conversion if you want to go and look at that. Moving on to the prosecutors, or prosecutors, as some of our American friends like to say. Very, very similar. Not too much different at all between the way these were painted and the Knight Azeros. Obviously they have slightly different weapons, so there's a little bit more purple on them because they've got more weapon handles, and also their hair, which is purple, because the Knight didn't have any hair, he just had those kind of spikes on his head which were black. So a bit more colourful, these guys. I think the tiny little bit of white on the shoulder pads stands out quite nicely, the little lightning bolts. There's not a huge amount to say on these guys, they're very, very similar to whatever I've said about the previous Stormcast models that I painted. I've done them all in exactly the same way, which doesn't take a vast amount of effort. It takes quite a bit of time. It's not an overly complicated technique that I've used to paint them. It's just taking the time to make it neat. And at a distance, I think the gold highlighting looks really, really good. One thing you'll notice actually on these guys, the Prosecutor Prime, his wings don't have any spikes on them. That's because since I was using a Prosecutor Prime model for the Knight Azeros, I wanted to make it look as different as possible from that model. Since it was going to be in the same pose, and it does have the same wings, so I decided I would take the spikes off the Prosecutor's wings just so he didn't look quite so spectacular. So the Knight Azeros can look a little bit more special than him on the battlefield. Also, it helps the Prime stand out from the rest of his unit as well, the fact that he doesn't have the spikes and they all do. Now moving on to probably my favourite one of the bunch, which is the Knight Venator with his little birdie. Just looking at it here, the one part that instantly stands out for me is the silver lightning bolt on his arm. I didn't intentionally pick that out in a way that would stand out so much. It could just be my eye, I don't know if that stands out for everyone else. The only one that was really difficult at all to paint while fully assembled was this guy, just because those kind of swirly bits of tapestry underneath him, they do cross over each other as they swirl up towards his back, and the bird is actually attached to them as well. So there are a lot of pieces that are quite difficult to reach. If you look round to the back, you can see that he does have a quiver of arrows there on his back as well. That was actually the most difficult part to reach because of the wings. So if there was one model that I would say possibly assemble after you finish painting it, maybe this guy, and leave the wings off. I don't think that would be too difficult to do. You probably have the best example of the grey gradient with the white on the end on these wings, just because they are so large. I think it looks fairly tasty. I'm very pleased with the way this army is looking, and I've got enough to have a good sized game now. I've still got a few more unassembled and a few more that have just been sprayed gold, which I may get to within the next couple of months. So looking at the overview again, 6 Stormcast models, 5 bolt action models. A decent amount by my standards for 1 month. This month it's probably going to be 100% terrain, because since I got my new battle mat, I went out and purchased several terrain pieces, and I received the Dragon Fate dais or dais for Christmas as well. So I'm painting that, and some little objective markers which are made from piles of treasure, which I'm going to do a video on at some point because they're very, very tasty. So I anticipate getting those finished, and then I may move on to the castle that I've purchased as well. If I get chance this month, which I probably will, I'm hoping to finish off all that terrain over the course of this month, and then if I can get all of that done, I am not entirely sure what's going to come next. Possibly my Kings of War Goblin War Trombone. That's just waiting to be primed at the moment. I had that assembled from Christmas, so I really want to add some more points to that Goblin army so I can start taking it to tournaments, because most of them seem to be 2,000 points, and at a stretch I can just about make 1,600 with an obscene amount of magic items at the moment, so definitely want some more. So as far as mass, you're going to see a huge amount next month, I anticipate, with all that terrain that I'm working on. And then if I can get the Goblin War Trombone finished on top of that, I'll probably move on to some more Stormcast, maybe Vandus Hammerhand. He's just over there on the other side of the room looking at me, pleading with me to paint him, but no, he has to wait his turn just like everyone else. He doesn't get any special treatment. No special treatment for Mr. Hammerhand, unfortunately. So ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've enjoyed looking over everything I've painted this month. I found this a very handy motivational tool, and I've noticed a couple of other people have started doing very similar series as well, inspired by me, no doubt. It's something I would definitely recommend, because it does really keep you on your toes. You can't just let that month peter out into nothing, because then you'll be uploading an empty video and shaming yourself. So it really does force you to get that paintbrush out. Especially during the last few days of the month, you really start cramming, trying to get as much done as possible to populate that video. Of course, if you have no trouble with motivation as it is, then it's not something you'll need. But if you do struggle, and you need something to just keep you ticking over, give it a try. Ta-ta for now, ladies and gentlemen, and I'll see you next month.